I mentioned this on a prior video. In the United States, as well as Europe, but I can really focus on the United States, there were laws passed that not only affected both men and women, but if you think we were better, like, versus Nazi Germany when it comes to disabled people, not so much. And also, it's not just us. Remember the Japanese internment camps. Those were pretty awful, but somehow we just don't hear enough about them, and that's why Barbenheimer is a funny thing that got Warner Brothers into trouble in Japan. Frankly, I think the Oppenheimer thing is all the patriarchy Ken would end up with, but he really just wanted horses. So, anyways, it was in the 20s these laws were first passed, because before that there wasn't enough of a country altogether. I mean, there probably were local laws, but federally, that's when they had this case that went to the Supreme Court by somebody who'd be really championed later. I'm not looking up names, I can't remember. But it was about this woman who had a daughter, and she had wanted more children, but she'd been sterilized, and now they were going to sterilize the daughter because they were, quote, idiots. And back then that meant you were intellectually disabled to some point. Like, you might not even be where you can't care for yourself, but maybe you were a little slow, something like that. Hell, they could even do that over having OCD. So, they ruled on this case, yeah, we have every right to sterilize you idiots and disableds. And so a lot of that happened, and to quote somebody who left a comment about abortion on my main post the other day, they left them vague so they can mostly attack people of color with them. Because how do you get rid of a people? Sterilize everybody. That'll, just erase people. And what's even crueler is, while those women knew about it, many women later didn't know about it. There were several black women in the 60s who were sterilized for no real reason other than they just lied and said they were, quote, idiots. And they actually were of full intellectual health, and they didn't even know they were sterilized. There was a huge lawsuit over this, rightfully so. And then, outside of intellectual disabilities, if you were disabled, like wheelchair needs or whatever, good luck for the most part. I cannot express how stupid the country was about this enough. Take the 1930s. Connie Boswell, who was one of the, she was like the, what is that stupid group I hate so much? The Hasley or whatever. She was like the lead singer of that. And FDR, the president, both hid that they needed wheelchairs. And even weirder, sometimes they were photographed with the wheelchairs, and those just were, like in Connie's case, I don't know how far they were spread, but she'd every now and then come out as disabled, and then she'd go back in the closet, which is so weird, because you're like, how can you hide needing a wheelchair? And what they did was put her on roller skates so she could mimic dancing. And then when she was with her sisters, they'd just mostly be seated, and nobody really thought too much of that. But it's just a really weird woman history to me. But those were famous people with money. If you didn't have that, good luck for anything, because all you're good for is if you're a poor person is working on the farm or whatever. And so you'd probably get sent to a state institution, sanatorium. And depending where you're at, that could be really good or really bad. I read a disabled advocate say they really hate how people tout state mental institutions that have long been abandoned as, oh, these are so scary, they're so haunted, you should break in there, or even pay for a tour. Because why they're so scary and horrible is these were places that were literally shut down for how poorly they treated their patients, who were basically their prisoners. I mean, just really horrible stories. And then, if you're like, well, okay, what if I had a little money? Would I be okay? No, I mentioned OCD landing you in a sanatorium earlier. Yes, that happened, even if you were wealthy. And there was no treatment for it. So, like, this one person who researched these old places, and this was a more upper scale one. There was one person that just every day they wrote down tons of numbers in a certain order, and they just did that day after day after day because that was how they controlled their OCD. But if they weren't in a sanatorium, apparently whatever happened to them drove them nuts enough that they tried to stab their roommate at the Y. So, okay, yeah. And then you add in what was really sad, even about people treated halfway decently. All these people had packed thinking someday they'd go home. They never went home. They died there. And by the time they died, most of them didn't even have family left. So their suitcases were just boxed up in the basement. Then you enter the era that, as Frank Reynolds said on Always Sunny, is when science was real dark. That's where you get the electro zaps for pretty much any reason for fun and above. And no, you didn't have a choice in it. If you've ever seen the movie Changeling with Angelina Jolie, that was based on a true story that happened in the very late 20s. That woman was sent to a sanatorium because they thought she was crazy, saying this isn't my child. And yeah, she got the electro treatment. Nothing was wrong with her, but they did that and she lost hair and teeth and shit. It was horrible. And then, like, you think that's bad? Lobotomy. That came out in the 30s, and till the 50s, that was considered real good stuff. And it'd be an ice pick up your nose, and I assume up to about here. And sometimes it helped, but also the odds of doing it wrong were pretty high. So it was mostly a lot of disasters. And was it Rosemary, or just Rose Kennedy, the eldest daughter of the Kennedys? That's what put her in a home till the 2010s when she died. She'd probably been intellectually disabled to a point. She could go out in public and carry on conversations. She could write at least at a 5th grade level, same with math. And her father thought that'd fix her. Well, it rotted her brain and she never could do anything after. She was just a body being looked after. So there was no repair for these things. They'd just do it many times against your will. It was against her will. Didn't matter. So, yeah, Frances Farmer's story is another one. And I'm sure people are like, well, you're talking a lot about intellectual and mental disabilities. Trust me, if you don't think they tried electrodes and shit on people in wheelchairs, I'm sure they did. I mean, science was real dark. They thought, if we can't fix them, we're just locking them away. And fix meant restore to full abled health. So, just really sad. So many lives lost. There's a very famous quote by some feminists that's like, imagine how many brilliant minds were censored because they had a bow on their heads, as in they were female. That's true. But also imagine how many brilliant minds were thrown away because they were disabled physically or emotionally or mentally.